Imagine being trapped in the hood and can't leave. Do you know what that do to your self-esteem? Could you still wake up and manage to dream? Or does it dry out like a raisin in the sun? Imagine being cuffed to the bed, birthing your son, never nursing your son, looking for a savior, but that person don't come. Locked in a cell, serving 23 and 1. Y'all chickens is dumb, I'm numb, cause getting money always been a rule of thumb. Flashback at summertime, mama busting our window. I seen a couple cop cars circle our residential, cause stomachs on empty and robberies on the menu. So when they plot against you, tell them dig a plot to get into. Red dot, Hindu, look at what I've been through. Survival is essential. Look, we still here. 10 years later. A bond that never will be broken. Yeah, you tried it. A bunch of war stories that can add up a lifetime. They make examples out you, judge handing out lifetimes. Said pray for Papa Speedy, they been locked up a lifetime. What up, Pop? Had to dedicate one rhyme. The rain don't stop, the clouds praying for sunshine. Soon as the money come, the haters flock at the same time. Tell them cocksuckers never quit on their day job. Whoever don't like it, just remember that's they pride. An eye for an eye, so we end up both blind. If you riding and I'm riding, ain't a thing when it's go time. Print the photo, you been plotting the whole time. I got audio and visual with a whole nine. Showed you how to turn a quarter into a whole nine. And it's the things I get for making sure that we both shine. That was me on the block. That was me on the block. That was me in that porch, trapping out of that house, looking out for the cops. Looking out for the cops. That was me in that jail cell, detainer with no bell. The pain I know so well. I just pray that we don't fail. Recognize real, but I can just not tell. Never let these lanes ride your way, be your coattail. I know you well.
What's up, bro, man? What's up for me? Something to drink, man. Change, huh?
How much money do you think there was?
Probably like $1 million. I wonder what should we get?
I know you know better, so I know you don't mean well. I never got a phone call, DM, or email. I used to get it per diem, wholesale, retail. Cash money or the check, filling the detail. No matter what, homie, I'ma always eat well. Long as the beat's cold and the stadium seats fill. Road less traveled on the incline steep hill. Lost a couple soldiers laid out in the streets killed. Still with you. Y'all look like y'all doing pretty well.
You know we is. We need to light two of them things, man.
Come on. I don't even come out the house.
I know, but look, right, I only wanted the two to get you around here. I need you to come out OT with me, man. Get it popping, man. We ain't gonna stop playing. I need you out there with me, man.
I'm gonna call you when I'm ready. I'm ready right now. I mean, it's good. Money's good.
All right, your word. That's your word.
Yeah, right.
Nice, right.
Call me later.
All right.
Out in the streets, see me just trying to rebuild. Survive hostile wars, but still suffer survivor's guilt. I'm the definition of real. This depression I can't conceal. When your flexion can get you killed. Here's a lesson to be revealed. Is it just me against the world? As long as it's progression, I always strive for perfection. Turn my tragedy to triumph and use my money as a weapon. That was me on the corner. That was me on the block. That was me on the block. That was me in that porch, trapping out of that house, looking out for the cops. Looking out for the cops. That was me in that jail cell, detainer with no bell. The pain I know so well. I just pray that we don't fail. Recognize real, but I can just not tell. Never let these lanes ride your way, be your coattail. I know you well. Staring at my future like a visitor from my present past. Stranded as a tightrope, spiraling in an arrow path. You watch a sand slide down with our hourglass. You laying, suffer, killing every hour pass.
Oh, I did. Came through just like I said it would. In there.
You know shit getting hot right now, right? We might gotta fall back a little bit.
I know, but not right now, man. Not right now.
Yes, right now.
Come on, man.
I'm pregnant, like.
You pregnant?
Yes, I'm pregnant. And this ain't a career. We can't do this forever. What didn't kill you made you tougher, I can vouch for that. They killed your cousin and you're planning out a counterattack. If you was raised in the struggle, you know how to adapt. When the winds get cold and the clouds turn pitch black. Forensic files said he died from a head crack. A savage word don't end up with your throat and both wrist slash. Reds took two before the vehicle just crashed. Another murder attempt, another corner dispatch. So meet me where it's cold at, where the nightmares unfold at. Where the dance is like who cares, where white tears can hold back. Still I gotta thank the Lord for that. But when you get a chance, please come and take a glance of my life. That was me on the block. That was me in that porch, trapping out of the house, looking out for the cops. That was me in that jail cell, detainer with no bell. The pain I know so well, I just pray that we don't fail. We're recognized real, but I can just not tell. Never let these lanes ride your way to your coattail. I know you well.
Hello? Detective Peters? Yeah, I did what y'all asked me to do, man. I'm on my way to the counter right now. But listen, do not make a move until we in the car. She going to jail, man. And I'ma still be out here. I can't afford to be looking like a rat out here. So don't make a move until we in the car. Alright, I'm on my way. Let's get it done.
Why they denied us proper education. Prison system just another version of the plantation. 17 cents an hour, can't even purchase top raiment. All the government when it's power when they keep us medicated. Focus on celebrities, Xbox, entertainment. Work hard, smoke good, pay taxes, get inebriated. Fuck the American dream, where I'm from it ain't reciprocated. Only legalized we so corporate going regulated. It's a market for y'all consumers overly dedicated. Smoke the whole oath to get haze, but I should have meditated. Donald Trump administration resemble Bush, Ronald Reagan, still fighting for civil rights like we did back in segregation. Still plotting on that black messiah, long awaited, strong black and gifted a woman. They ain't anticipated, disciplined, dedicated, real soldier declarated. That's the real reason if you're wondering why I'm underrated.
I mean, really, why is our school system failing? Why is the healthcare system failing? Why is the prison system failing? Let's get to the meat and potatoes, though. I mean, I gotta give you a first-hand account.
Facts.
ABC, NBC, tune in, come on, Fox.
6 years on the run, you can check the affidavits. Middle finger at the plaintiffs, posted up at arraignment. Spain 2 cases for the judge, issued a new detainer. Now I'm in the matrix, feeling like Morpheus. Law library, researching habeas corpus. Then my water broke, and that was really unfortunate. Handcuffed to the bed, right spot like a contortionist. Damn, can I live?
Can I live? Can I live?
My son was a fugitive before he opened one eyelid. Imagine life for a hustler as real as I is. Damn, Doc passed me a couple more sedatives. The new Jim Crow, all reality's relative. Struggle rapper still struggling, trying to stay relevant. But it's politics as usual. Round table with my delegates. Discipline, dedicated, real soldiers declarated. That's the real reason if you're wondering why we're underrated.
I mean, I've been running this race so long. I think I put the muscle trying to outrun fate. I know you wanted me running in place.
Yeah.
I double back on that ass though, huh? Yeah, let's go.
One thing about the hood, I always adapt to it. One thing you never say is I turn my back to it. Back to back going through it, who got your back going through it? When my cousin died, not a shoulder I could cry on. It only makes sense. Of course you're gonna lose friends, don't trip loose ends. But when did this loyalty become the new trend? Old story, new spin. My roster glory from a little shorty, little towards Honda Cordy, moving work out of town. Motown, Smear and Gordy, only get one life, and no one gonna live it for me. You only get one mic, and only you can tell your story. So I wanna make sure it's accurate, cause everything has a purpose, even an accident. Thinking how I almost lost my life in that accident. I escaped death 5 times on my life, that ain't no accident.
They can't kill me. But let's get into it. It's not a school to prison pipeline. It's a prison to prison pipeline. Must I return, we were in prison. When we awaited those first ships, and when we boarded, we continued that journey in prison. And then that bondage, it continued when we reached the plantation. Then after the plantation, after we was free, and when America, I guess, was great again, we was forced to be sharecroppers and had to work back at them same plantations, or was arrested for loitering, vagrancy, because we was poor. And then that's where we got the prisons for profit and forced labor. And then we went on to Jim Crow. And after that, you know, civil rights and mass incarceration. It's not a school to prison pipeline. It's a prison to prison pipeline. And it begins and ends with your mind. Tune in. Take a breath. Be free. Respect your ancestors. They died. They died for us. Honor their legacy. Continue to fight. We all we got. And all we got is us.
Thank you so much for that. I want to share a brief bio about Mary, and then we'll start our conversation. Mary Enoch Elizabeth Baxter, also known by her hip hop name Isis the Savior, is a Philadelphia artist who creates socially conscious music through an autobiographical lens. She is an art and design graduate of the Community College of Philadelphia, who also recently received a second degree in behavioral health. She is a single mother, entrepreneur, and prison reform advocate. In the decade since her release, Mary has focused on her artistic practice and also as an activist, with specific work focused on ending the shackling of pregnant women while incarcerated. Good evening, Mary. You're muted. You're muted.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining me in this conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm really honored to be here tonight.
Thank you. I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Kira Rodriguez, who shaped the questions that I am about to ask. And I wanted to start with asking you what your, how you got into storytelling and filmmaking specifically.
Well, with storytelling, I guess it really was birthed out of my love for writing poetry. And then that evolved into writing hip hop. And then that pretty much evolved into me trying to increase my music's visibility and, shifting from just merely audio engagement with the listeners and wanting to appeal to more of their senses. And, as an indie artist, without a large machine, you tend to have to do everything, yourself, and you're like a lot of hands-on with it. And you don't really have anyone to help you develop those ideas and concepts about how things should visually take shape or complement the music best. So out of necessity of really wanting to uplift my musical content is where I first started experimenting with writing treatments and creating visuals. And then over time, I just developed a deeper love and passion and appreciation for filmmaking. So for me, I would have to say it happened pretty, organic.
Great, thank you. So with the two projects that we're working on tonight and other films, can you talk a little bit about your process and how you choose projects?
Yeah, I mean, what usually drives me is having a direct connection to the content or the subject matter and, really asking myself, is this a good story to tell or to want to engage people with? As I said before, as a poet and a hip hop artist, storytelling, has really played a major role in my self-expression. So for me, Telling stories is a way to, you know, process, also understand and gain wisdom, not only about myself, but the world around me. It's about trying to make sense of my experiences and experiences of those that I'm in community with. Whether it's something I personally experienced or something that, you know, is affecting the community or society as a whole. So I like to create projects that spark dialogue around not only, you know, present day contemporary issues, but also those that have historical relevance and that are, you know, affecting the world that I'm living in. But usually it'll fall somewhere in the area of justice work. So choosing projects, when choosing projects, I like to tether them to policy and to a tangible, like, social change outcome.
That's wonderful. You know, also thinking about, related to what you just said, there is something, a through line in your work, of course, about disrupting the prison to prison pipeline and thinking about how you use your work as an activist. Can you also talk about your activism, working with incarcerated mothers and mothers to be?
Yeah, I think in one way that, like, my work disrupts that pipeline is, number one, it acknowledges that a pipeline exists. Although I'm not a big fan of, you know, merely just raising awareness without mobility and action, it does inform people who were otherwise oblivious as to way, you know, prisons function and have operated. So my work gives them ability to, you know, trace and make critiques in a very concrete way based on, you know, my story. And then two, you know, I feel like the work provides a voice and face. I consider myself an expert on my experience. So throughout, you know, my work, I'm trying to, you know, humanize these events as someone has been shuffled through these systems and structures since age 11. Because I think one of the problems with mainstream America is that they view the carceral system like in a very limited way. It's kind of cut and dry. You know, someone commits a crime, they're arrested, punished, you know, end of story. Or depending on the type of media that the person is consuming, it can be very sensationalized or twisted by Hollywood. And other than what it actually is, that experience. And the general, you know, consensus around public safety in those ways can and are very skewed, and crime or what is perceived to be criminal is actually, you know, more complex and nuanced. And, you know, once we begin to unpack the full story around the origins of policing in America and the history of Black subjugation, we have to start at the inhumane institution and practice of slavery. I also think that, you know, my particular mode of storytelling has created a platform where I'm able to pivot it into these other spaces that weren't easily accessible before, in terms of, you know, meeting with legislators and co-authoring policy with other impacted women, specifically towards the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act, which is the law to stop the shackling. So we have, you know, that ability to co-govern. So that's another way that it's rupturing this prison-to-prison pipeline. And, you know, these are some of the ways that, you know, that we do this work. But as far as my work with formerly incarcerated women, you know, as a woman that's formerly incarcerated who has the experience of being pregnant while incarcerated, being shackled while incarcerated, 43 hours, handcuffed to a hospital bed, that traumatic experience, it really, I guess, fuels me and was important for me to not only advocate for myself, but provide support for women facing similar traumas. I know what it personally feels like to be separated, you know, from my child, and the helplessness, humiliation, the loss of dignity and agency over my body, and ultimately, like, my existence. So for me, it was not only necessary for my healing to speak to those issues and really get involved in supporting policy that help restore connections between mothers and their children, but also, you know, to let people know that when you incarcerate a woman, you're essentially incarcerating an entire community. In our society, the women are the crux. They are the nurturers. They are the ones that hold, families together. So that was one of my main inspirations of wanting to get into the work and continue to work. And then I seen like the early on success with the narrative, Ain't I a Woman, and how, that opened up a lot of doors for me to have my voice heard. So I wanted to share, that tool with women that were incarcerated. So last spring, I was able to return to Riverside Corrections, which is the facility where I was housed at during my incarceration, and really share those tools with those women and, inspire them to, use their narratives to tell a different story and make themselves visible. And if I could do it, surely they could too.
Thank you.
And I definitely want to thank Lyra Speck, Nina Ball. She was one of my co-facilitators. She was my co-facilitator that came in and really rolled up her sleeves and got to work in providing support for these women as they embarked on their experience with storytelling, like some of them for the very first time in this way.
That's really powerful. Thank you. Another question that I wanted to ask you was about your MC name, Isis. And so we know that in like Kemetic or Egyptian mythology, Isis is a mother and a healer, and someone who has control over fate and the ability to reclaim dignity. And I'm just curious, what is your relationship? How did you come to?
Well, as someone that, I grew up as a ward of the state since age 11. And, I didn't have access to a typical nuclear family. So I was always trying to redefine my own origins and search for, a way to connect myself with a larger story. So at one of the facilities where I was living at, Carson Valley School, I met a teacher who gave me a book titled Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Anthony Broader. And it pretty much kind of like just revolutionized the way that I saw the world. It was like the first time I was given an alternate, narrative to what, I had been indoctrinated with in terms of, just a lot of Black toxicity through the media, through, education books at school. Wasn't a lot of contributions outside of Black History Month. So this gave me a deeper look and insight into it, like this vast history, this, genius that, Black people possess. And one of the deities in the book was Isis, and that really resonated with me, being like this ultimate creative force and a nurturer and a healer, and me being, with these fragmented relationships with my parents and essentially having to parent myself and become my own savior. So out of necessity, that's pretty much how I became Isis the Savior.
Thank you. I always love asking people about their names, and that's really beautiful. I want to ask, we have a question from the audience that I'll ask, and then we'll go to the next film. This is from the lovely Marla Campbell-Harris, who says she's curious about what the role of the local recidivism, diversion, and reentry programs and initiatives are in your journey pre and post release. And then the second part of the question, and what is the work that is needed for these vital programs to align with your focus of awareness, mobility, and action?
Okay. Hi, Marla. For me, I always, if I'm going to present a program or something, to the community, I want the community involved from day one. So, my needs may be different from another woman. So it's really creating like these think tanks of incarcerated women to really design what those programs look like. And, the role that reentry programs played in my life was very, essential and crucial. When I came out, I was, luckily was able to get into a program that provided me with employment at about $10 an hour, which, wasn't minimum wage, but, it was something to help get me on my feet, because, two of the main things that people struggle with and, ultimately they recidivate because of is not having, a stable employment or a house. So those are some of the things that I like to see more investment in, as well as, paths to higher education. Because, without it, you're not going to be able to get a job at a livable wage. Unfortunately, we live in, Pennsylvania, and our minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. And it's not a wage where, people can thrive, especially if you have children. So a lot of people, they tend to commit survival crimes or they turn to drugs and alcohol to cope with the inability of being able to provide for themselves and their loved ones. So I would like to see more investment in those areas.
Sure. I want to go to the next film, which is called The Fall of America, which was directed by you and edited by Nimi, correct? Mary, that's correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
Do it. Say it. You want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
white
like me to condemn. White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by.
It's the fall of America. Wake up in your ear, martial law in your area. King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier. If you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier. The fall of America. Wake up in your ear, martial law in your area. King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier. If you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier. The battle lines of Babylon, televised murder marathons, African Amazon, wrestling in the Amazon, Marine Maritime. Watch the seven seas align when I conjure rhyme. Why you waiting on a sign, lost in the paradigm? I carry the cross, behead, lapel, horseman. Never shut my physical shell on that 33rd parallel. We paraphrase the ghetto as hell. Theories on government filled with conspiracy tales. Paranoid in the slums cause most our leaders have failed. Politicians play dumb and speak with forked tongue. Parasitic traits of snakes feeding us little crumbs. But wait, I ain't get the random shootouts with the cops and I fade away like and one. My bullets throwing tantrums till you fall off from my handgun. It's the final call, sound the band drums. It's the fall of America, wake up in the air, martial law in your area. King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier. If you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier. The fall of America, wake up in the air, martial law in your area. King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier. If you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier. Panakian scripts prophesized apocalypse. Global warning, warmings, ice caps, polar shifts. No running water, gas, food, electric. The dark side of the moon, 7 whole day eclipse. Agents with binoculars, police state metropolis. Freedom fighters, organizers, rally up the populace. Against the brainwashing techniques and microchips. The monetary system no longer determines opulence. Capitalism driven generational recidivism. Illuminati chants as we overthrow the system. Can't turn the clocks back on the times that we live into. The powers back in the hands of the citizens. Executive orders, election supporters, protect the conformists, neglect the assures, news quarters, recorded, reported, stress empty rhetoric, ignore it, retorted, express the importance, the stress and the torment, the rest without warnings, the justice is foreign, the customs ignoring, discuss the Orient. It's the fall of America, wake up in the air, martial law in your area, King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier, if you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier. The fall of America, wake up in the air, martial law in your area. King of Rich Plan, no power is the barrier. If you don't prepare, it'll be more scarier.
Thank you for that as well. It's really, really powerful. I want to ask you about, this idea of counter narratives and, sort of taking responsibility for presenting the news and truth on our own, and just talk about how you use already existing headlines and footage to create your own narratives.
All right. With this particular piece, I wanted to stress, what I'm saying and depicting is not a new phenomenon. And, because I feel like a lot of people in mainstream culture seem to be shocked that, racism and systemic oppression and police brutality exist in this country. So in my mind, counter narratives are extremely important to combat that dissonance and that arbitrary ignorance that a lot of us seem to continue to wrestle with, especially when we consider the ways in which mainstream media reports news. A lot of times the stories are conveyed as isolated incidents that don't necessarily delve into the historical frameworks that connect these incidents of racial violence and oppression to larger conversations about race, power, and white supremacy in America, and the mechanisms in which they are enforced, upheld, and perpetuated in our society. So I wanted to create something that was holistic and told a more fuller story about the collective trauma that Black people share. And, also be, essentially denied the American dream that states, all people are created equal and entitled to this life of liberty, justice, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, thank you. That is not meted out at all. Is there a switch for you between being an MC and then being a filmmaker and a director? Like, how do you go between the two and making work where they're both?
Is, although music is, an extremely powerful and mobilizing force, there's something about it that becomes more amplified and potent when you parallel it with the moving image. It's like this visceral experience that is able to engage the viewer, the viewer's multiple senses all at once. When you hear something, there's always this skepticism about it. But when you can actually see something with your own two eyes, it makes it more believable. So, having both of those mediums in conversation with each other and at my disposal, it just helps me really strengthen my storytelling ability and connect with audiences. For me, I don't feel like I'm as limited. So I tend to get really excited about those possibilities.
Can you talk about how you and Nimi, who you collaborated with on both projects, how did you all meet?
Sure. I originally met Nimi through another artist in his hometown of Newark, New Jersey, a woman by the name of Marcy DePina, who was a curator at the Newark Museum and executive director at Newark Riverfront, had invited me to perform at a concert at the Riverfront. I believe it was like in 2017, and a young man by the name of Khalil Gibran was also on the bill, and we just immediately connected over our shared enthusiasm over lyricism and, the importance of creating meaningful content and, pulling on audiences' heartstrings. So after the show, we exchanged info, got each other's social media handles, and had vowed to collab one day, which unfortunately we never did, but we stayed in contact, via social media. And one day he, posted a new single called, I think it was F12. And just immediately when I saw the visual, the cinematography, I knew that I wanted to work with the person who shot the video. So I reached out to him, and he connected me with Nimi, and we had corresponded over email, and then later over the phone, and I was, explaining to him, my story, and, he initially sent me a treatment over, but I wound up wanting to stick more to my personal story since, I had planned on using this film to amplify this national campaign to restore dignity to incarcerated women. And he was very receptive and just, a real pleasure to work with. He didn't have any problems, traveling to Philly, to any of the, locations. Philly's a rough city. And we did shoot some of it at like a notorious housing project, but he was really cool, really dope. And yeah, it was just magic from there.
That's really great. What are you working on next, in all the ways?
What next?
What are you doing work-wise, activism, emceeing, filmmaking? What's coming up?
So there is an extended version of The Fall of America that also has performance shots alongside the National Guard that was in Philly. So we're still working on that narrative, me and Nimi. But due to COVID, it's been like a struggle in terms of, gathering folks to film. But right now, we currently, I'm a part of a group exhibition at MoMA PS1 that's curated by Nicole Fleetwood. There's also a book that accompanies this exhibit where my work is featured. And right now we've just been named like Best in Show in one of the top moments in art by the New York Times. So that's going on. Also, if you want to learn more about my story, there's a podcast that's produced by NPR called Louder Than a Riot. You can check that out, which goes more deeper into my story and my experience with incarceration and my early interactions with the system since age 11. We also have, the exhibit at the African American Museum that's going on. You can check that out virtually. Hopefully when these restrictions around gathering are lifted, folks can come and check it out in person. Stay tuned for a artist talk series that's in the work with MoMA's PS1, where I'll be interviewing artists that are in the exhibition, Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration. That's in the works. And then there's also some more collaborations with Art for Justice and Mural Arts Philadelphia on the horizon. And then there's my work on the ground with the Dignity Act Now Collective and National Bailout. If you want to support any of these organizations, please go online, nationalbailout.org, and make a donation to help free people during pre-trial, because a report that was just released not long ago determined that about 78% of the people that they have bailed out, cases wound up being thrown out. So you have people that could potentially stayed in prison, losing their cars, their jobs, their houses, their children. All of that has been ruptured. So that's another rupture to the prison-to-prison pipeline. And that has been, that's a grassroots organization, and donations, predominantly, the majority of donations come from community members that look like us, that are concerned about mass incarceration and its, legacy to continue the institution of slavery in a lot of ways. So you can look out for that.
Thank you. That is a lot. On everything that's going on despite the pandemic, that you have these incredible projects out in the world. I want to encourage folks in the audience, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat. We have about 13 more minutes to field any questions. I don't have any more, so I will ask one that I just got. How did you get involved with Mural Arts? That comes from someone.
It's a wild story. And it didn't happen necessarily. So the way I got involved with Mural Arts was through another fellowship. And that was through Open Philanthropy and the Souls Day Agency and the Right of Return Fellowship. And that was developed by Philadelphia native Russell Craig and Jesse Crimes, who's from Lancaster, but he's based in Philly now. They have been, working with Mural Arts as Guild, as teaching artists, and somehow they got connected with Open Philanthropy and the Soul J Agency, and they created the first fellowship for formerly incarcerated artists designed to empower those artists by giving them $10,000 in, artist fee, and then $10,000 to create a project. So I was chosen 1 out of 300 people to be a part of the first cohort of 7 artists. So through that fellowship, they connected me with Mural Arts because they had already been working with Mural Arts, and Mural Arts had got a grant through Art for Justice. So I was able to join their first cohort of Reimagining Reentry to do finishing costs for the Ain't I a Woman film. So that's kind of how I got connected with Mural Arts. And then I got pulled into another much bigger and longer fellowship where I was able to create the curriculum and go into Riverside and bring in fellow artists to help co-facilitate that 12-week workshop on the power of narrative. So that's pretty much how I got connected.
Thank you. We have another question, and that is, what advice do you have for someone who was recently released?
For someone that's recently released, I advise them to definitely get online to Dignity Act Now Collective, dignityact.org, and connect with some of the committees. We do provide supportive services in terms of political education, but also monetarily. During the pandemic, we helped them stay digitally connected by providing laptops, and then also working with Community Bell Fund to do follow-up calls and check-ins. Another thing, so some advice for someone that's recently released is definitely get in touch with me. I don't mind sharing any resources that I have. I know Mural Arts is in the beginning stages of developing a reentry program, a women's guild, where women will be provided 20-hour-a-week jobs, as well as opportunities to earn extra money in other public art projects. So, and also, if you're thinking about furthering your education, Community College of Philadelphia is an excellent resource. It's where I met a lot of my networks. The way that I got the Right of Return Fellowship was through an internship a practicum that I was doing for youth work services certification. And one of the women that worked at the actual program, she forwarded me the email to apply. So, and then there's also the Mayor's Office of Reentry Services. So just tapping into whatever you can, and I'm definitely a resource. So if you want to talk more in depth, I'll put my information in the chat.
Thank you, Mary. So we have another question. Oh, hi, this is from Brenda Dixon Gottschalk. The question is, the worst pandemic is of course racism. I'm awed that you work inside the systems that have been designed to disinherit us. Can you speak to how you manage what must be a lot of anger without becoming bitter? That's a really great question. And without letting it eat you up.
It's tough, it's hard, but for me, being as authentic as possible, not compromising, calling out microaggressions, putting people to task. Earlier this summer, we had this great, racial awakening where we had all these corporations, acknowledging that, these systems of oppression exist, that this isn't in the imagination of the collective. So really calling people to task and not being afraid to speak up when needed. That's pretty much how I navigate being authentic.
Great. And then I think this will be our last question, unless another one comes through to Victoria. And that is, can you talk about your work in the indie film space and how you've developed those relationships?
Well, those relationships are still developing. Hopefully, Black Star Film Festival, we can make a connection. Yeah, I'm just really getting my feet wet with film and really, pushing the boundaries of what I can do inside of a music video. But I would definitely love to pivot to documentaries. I actually do have a documentary that I did on housing insecurity for college students. That's through Real College. So if you Google Invisible People Real College, you'll see a documentary. I helped film some of that documentary, and I'm featured in that documentary. But I would definitely love to do more documentaries. I was in the process of creating one with the women at Riverside, but because of COVID-19, that work had to be cut short. But also feature film. I'm very interested in telling, you know, a different story, a more radical story about the Black experience, something different than what we're usually indoctrinated with in terms of comedies and toxicity and just like the minstrel show. So yeah, I'm excited on, you know, this trajectory. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for sharing these works with us and for being, you know, in the hot seat tonight. I really appreciate it. I want to pass it over to James.
Hey, thank you, Maori, and thank you, Mary, for sharing your time and talents with us tonight. Mural Arts and the African American Museum want to encourage you to visit aampmuseum.org or muralarts.org, and please check out the Rendering Justice exhibition. We do hope that you'll check it out virtually in this time we can't be together physically. We want to also remind you that our works on display in the Rendering Justice exhibition were made possible by generous funding from Art for Justice, an initiative founded by Agnes Gunn in collaboration with the Ford Foundation, as well as Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors and the National Endowment for the Arts. So thank you to our funders. Also, thank you to the great organizations who partnered for tonight, Mural Arts Philadelphia, Black Star Film Festival, and the African American Museum in Philadelphia, along with all of our partners from across the city for their support in making this work come to life. Everyone stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me, guys. Bye.